I think time up. We can start. Nilu,
Hello, ma'am. Am I audible?
1 second. Yes,
Okay, ma'am. Is there echo?
I think slightly.
Okay, just a minute, ma'am. Is it fine now?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Speaker for today's session is Dr. Subalalita CN. Dr. Subalalita CN is currently working as an associate professor in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering in SRM Institute of Science and Technology, Chennai campus. She has published over 18 articles in various journals and conferences. She was 3 times consequent gold medal winner in the research day held at SRMIST in the years 2016, 17, and 18. She is a member of Indian Science Congress and IET. Her research interests are natural language processing, machine learning, discourse analysis, and computational linguistics. We welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, shall we start?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, I'll start presenting my screen. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, is my screen visible now? Okay. If there's some problem in the middle, do let me know. And yeah, because I may not see you guys. Like I only see my screen. Fine. Yeah. So it's a nice experience. Thank you so much, Dr. Umarani ma'am, for giving me this opportunity. And yeah, thank you, ma'am. Yeah, so today we are going to see about, like, I know, like, you're all being exposed to various machine learning techniques for the past 2 days. I think you're all done with supervised also. So today we are going to see a session on unsupervised learning and also about natural language processing, which is a subdomain of artificial intelligence. That's how we call it as. So these are the targets that has been fixed for the day today. First, we're going to look at, like, what is unsupervised machine learning, and then we're going to see an example instance of unsupervised machine learning, that is k-means clustering. And in the next session, we will have a hands-on session on k-means. We will look at a code, like how do we code it using Python. And then the later half, the last session would be on natural language processing, and then followed by the hands-on session on NLP. So natural language processing, in short, is called as NLP. Fine. Okay, so I know that you're all exposed to supervised ML algorithm, but I just thought of, like, to start with supervised ML algorithm, and then how do we actually differentiate with unsupervised ML algorithm. Okay, so I know that I know that you all know that the supervised algorithm takes a labeled input, right? So I've just given a very simple example so that can differentiate clearly. I hope so. The difference between a supervised and an ML algorithm. In a supervised ML algorithm, the training input is given along with the labels. So I always visualize supervised algorithm like this. Like, even I teach my students like this. So supervised algorithm is like, you're given the question and you're also given the answer, and you have to prepare for your exam. This is how you visualize supervised ML algorithm. You are given the questions and you are given the answers. Now it is our job. So let's say we are preparing ourselves for the exam. So how do we do that? Like, we take the question, we learn the answer, and then we try to interpret them. we take a question and we try for a, yeah, was there a problem? Fine. So for a same question, we will think of many answers, and for the same answer, we will think of many questions. So that is how a supervised ML algorithm works. So the like we train ourselves with a question, how do we interpret how the question and the answers are related, and then finally one day exam comes, we are given with some question. The question may not be the one which we trained ourselves with, but we know because we were interpreting between the relations between the questions and the answers while we were preparing for the exam. So now we are sitting in the examination hall and we are given a set of questions and we know how to do that. So the preparation you do for the examination, you call it as training in supervised ML algorithm, and whereas the examination hall you take the exam, right? So that is called testing. So now coming to the slide which is in front of you. The labeled fruits for training is given. So each and every fruit is given a name. So the machine learning model, whatever it is, it can be a support vector machine, or it can be a naive-based classifier, it can be KNN, or whatever classifier it is. So what it is going to do is that, like, it knows that the fruit is given, and it also knows that a fruit is given, and also it knows the name of the fruit. So not only so the in the picture there's only one apple, but it's not so in the reality. In reality, what happens is that you'll be given with many apples. So many apples in the sense, each apple will be in different shape and different color, right? So mostly it's going to be in red, but the red also going to be in a much variation, dark red or light red or pale red or green, pale green or whatever it is. So now it is the job of the machine learning algorithm is to take the images of the fruit. Okay, it's going to be the image, it's not going to be the real fruit. I know, I know you all know that. So the given the image of the fruit and the way the different images of the fruit, and knowing the fact that that fruit is an apple, so now the machine learning algorithm is going to interpret itself. What are the commonalities that exist between all the categories of the fruit that come under the category of apple, because it knows the category. The category is called apple and it knows that. So now it is ready to judge. So after having learned the interpretations, the relations between all the classes, not only it's doing for the apple, it's doing for other classes as well. So we call it as a multi-classifier when it is doing for many classes. So each and every fruit here is going to be a class or a category. So if it is doing for a two class, we call it as a binary classifier. So you would have been taught that a male is a spam or not. So if it is a fruit, if it is a cat or dog, so then that case is called a binary classification, 0 or 1. Okay, so this after training itself, when a test fruit is given, so what it is going to 1 second, yeah. So what it is going to output, so now the test is given to the model. So after training itself, what will spit out is that a classifier model. So that to that model a test input is given. So now it will judge that it knows, because it has prepared itself to identify any fruit is given to it, right? So remember, the in reality, it's going to be trained with many instances for a single class even. So the example given here is like for apple class, there's only one apple. It's not so. For a single apple class, there's going to be many apples. So after during the testing, a fruit is given, so it is going to say that okay, this fruit belongs to pomegranate class. So this is how supervised ML algorithm works. Why I thought of telling you this, like I know the fact that it was taught, like I just wanted to differentiate like how this differs from unsupervised learning, so which is our target today. So far it's clear. Yes, is there any doubt? You can stop me in the middle and ask question. Can we move on?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, fine. So now the same scenario. So how it is going to change when it is going to become an unsupervised ML algorithm. So now you are given the fruits, but see, you don't have labels to them. So nobody tells you that it's not always possible, right? Like it's not always possible to label a data. So in this case, like, so when we have millions and trillions of images, nobody cannot I mean, no one can sit and put the label for us. So think of Google, which is working for trillions of web pages, and it is working for us for to answer our query. So nobody can label that. It's not possible always. So what happens? So an unlabeled fruits for training is given. So but somehow the job has to be done, right? So how it is going to be done? That's the crux. So the unsupervised machine learning takes the unlabeled fruits for training. So here, remember, the fruits are images. It's not the real fruit. Yeah. So and it is given for training. Now, though it does not know what fruit it is. But remember a scenario. So think of a scenario. These fruits are given to a baby, right? So and you ask the baby does not know the name of the fruits, right? But you tell him to just segregate the fruits. So how does he or she will do? So he checks for the similarity in terms of color, shape, and then it can do that, right? So that's how. So the machine learning algorithms are also similar to babies. So what they do is that they tap the similarity that exists between the similar categories of fruits, and then it just segregates. So that's how the model is going to work. So when a test fruit is given, now this time it is not going to do the job like this. It can only do that to which tray I can put. So the output, so here are like the tray, in the sense like to which group it belongs to. Does it belong to the Apple group? So the machine learning model would have, when you give a training data set, it will just group the similar kind of data and it will put it in a tray. So here we call it as a tray. So soon we will move on to a technical how it is called it as. So right now we just think it as a tray. So now the output is going to tell you, so to which tray it has to go. Because why it is telling like this? Because it does not know when it was training that it is an orange, because nobody gave it the unlabeled fruits. Unlabeled, I mean, nobody gave the labels for it. So it does not know the labels, but it can group it and it can segregate it, so like the babies do. So this is what is unsupervised algorithm, and this is how it differs from the supervised algorithm. Then you can ask me, like, what is the use of this? Yes, there could be uses, like you can think of unsupervised ML algorithm, like you are given a bunch of millions of text documents or something like that. So you may not know the before. So what happens in real time scenario is that, like, think of your Google search, right? So the query you're giving us some query and you're getting some answers, right? So you're getting it in less than a second. So it's not even a second, it's less than a second. It is handling so much of pages, and it is giving it to you. To do this offline, so what they should have done is that, like, it's not every process cannot happen online. So though the query you are giving and the retrieval is happening online, on the fly it is happening, but the every process cannot happen online. So they should have done some Google should have done some offline process beforehand. So what they would have done, they would have crawled the web pages, they would have indexed it. So you know what is indexing, right? So they would have seen in books. So what in books, like this particular topic is in this particular page number. So that is similar to indexing. So these are the documents are indexed in. So these are the words that are pointing to these documents. So you can visualize indexing like that. So they should have organized those things. So before organizing, so don't you think it makes sense to group them beforehand? Like, because there are so many web pages, you are giving a query and you want a specific answer. That is actually classification. Classification happening before you. So that you can think of actually classification, supervised learning. So you're given a query. That query is a class. That query is a class, and to that class, whatever documents that are retrieved in front of you are belongs to that class. Don't you think so? Yes. So to do this classification, it makes sense to have done an unsupervised grouping before that. So even before classifying things, as a pre-processing step, before even knowing what it is, you can do a group. Grouping. We will move on to the technical terms later. These similar groups can be grouped together, and after that you can run some model on top of this and say that, okay, this is orange or this is apple. So instead of doing it beforehand, there's a difference. So instead of this beforehand, if you label it, it may throw a lot of cost to the computation. So because we are not handling thousands or 2000 number of data, so we are machine learning algorithms in reality are tackling a million and trillions of data. So it's not possible to label them. What you can do them first, you can group them using an unsupervised algorithm, put a label and then apply labels. Then it will be really helpful. So that's how unsupervised ML algorithm works. So now you understood the difference between an unsupervised and a supervised algorithm. Yes. Is there any questions so far?
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yeah.
Ma'am, is there only a difference of labeling in both of them? Labeling only?
No. In terms of process, also they do differ.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, so that we will understand now. So this is
Okay,
just
ma'am.
an initial. Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah. No problem. Yeah. So now you can understand this. You should have been seeing this for the past 2 days. Like supervised algorithms, you give labels, you give training data. Training data comes along with the label, and there's a machine learning algorithm. So I'm talking about 1 second. I'm talking about this. Okay. So this I'm talking about. So training data, and there's a machine learning algorithm. It is going to predict something, and new data is tested, and you do some prediction. So this is this machine learning, this supervised algorithm can do a classification. So this you can think of like oranges, and this you can think of apples. There are two fruits. It can draw a classification. I mean, it can separate, draw a boundary, and then it can separate. Remember, everything is mathematics behind. So max is the heart behind the machine learning. So and it is going to separate it, and these two classes are separated. Either this can be done. This is called classification, or the supervised learning could also be a regression analysis, wherein you the line of best fit, right? You're all teachers, you know better than me. So regression analysis, in which like line of best fit. So y is equal to mx plus b. So you fit the best line, and you find the a good slope for it, and good intercept at which it can cross the y-axis in a perfect way. So that like it is accommodating all the training set. So that like for the unknown x, say for instance, like you have a set of xy pairs. So wherein like x is the square feet of a home and y is the rent of a home. So you are given some xy, so square feet, and then rent. So now for this, you are supposed to predict, like for the unknown square feet, somebody gives you 2500 square feet, which is not in the training set, and you want to build a model for that. So this regression would help. So then you will find a very good slope, and you'll find a very good intercept at the end of this training, and you will input unknown values of x, and you can predict. So that is called regression. So the difference between you would have been taught this, like the difference between regression and this classification. Regression deals with continuous values, whereas classification deals with discrete values, 0 or 1. So this 0 or 1. So this is continuous values like 1, 1.2. So because this y can be anything. So here y takes the value only 0 or 1, apple or orange, or it can even take more. If there are many fruits, then it can take even 2 or 3, depending upon the number of classes given to it. Fine. So this is supervised learning. So now we are going to move to unsupervised learning. Okay. So this is our task today. So the data have no target attribute. So meaning it is not having any labels to it. So we want to explore the data to find some intrinsic structures in them. So you are given the data with no target attribute, but you want to find some intrinsic structures. So intrinsic structures in the sense like these structures have what two oranges would share with each other, what two orange images would share with each other. So you try to tap that. Somebody asked me, right, like they only differ in terms of labeling. No, they do differ in terms of the way they process the data. So that's what before you get confused, like I'll just move on to the point. So those intrinsic structures and are called similar groups. They are called clusters. So this is target. This is the jargon we have to use from now on. So those group, we said like we were grouping similar images, right? So that is called cluster. So we have to use the term cluster, and the process is called clustering. Okay. Remember, the term classification is used when you use a supervised learning, and the term clustering is used when you use a unsupervised learning. So clustering is grouping. Classification is like classifying when you know the classes beforehand. So far, okay? Yes. Can we move on? Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Fine. Yeah, some more on clustering. So I'd like to throw some more. Clustering is a technique to find similarity groups in data called clusters, so that we know right now. So real time scenarios, like where do you see all these like group of people of similar sizes together? So this is how they cluster us, right? So when you go to branded showrooms or any showrooms, they would have this, right? So what they have done, they have clustered us like. Into small XL or double XL or L or small L, whatever it is. Don't you think that is actually clustering? They do not know about us, but they have somehow come up with these clusters so that we can fit into these clusters. So that's what that's how we can think of clustering as. And in marketing, group customers according to their shopping habits. Yeah. So not everybody, certain kind of customers are like Indian food, so they only buy these kind of groceries. So though so the shop owner should be ready with these kind of groceries. Some are towards these, so they have to be ready with these groceries, meaning so when they buy this they should also buy this, so they should also buy this. They all move into one cluster. So though they are different objects, that's what I'm trying to tell. So these are the some real-time scenario, so where clustering can be visualized. And now moving on to like how what are the types of clustering. So there's two dimensions to this, and we are looking at the dimension one. We call it as a hard clustering, and we call it as a there are two types. There is soft clustering. So when you talk of hard, I take one data point. So let's say this is one cluster, and there is one more cluster that is C2. Okay, I have a data point with me. So when I do a hard clustering, this data point X should go only to this. There is no question of putting this data point to either of this. Okay, but can anyone tell me there could that is hard clustering? Okay, so but soft clustering is that like you can afford to put this data point in two clusters. So that's what soft clustering is. But can anyone tell me like where scenarios come where you can put a single data point in both the clusters? The answer is actually in the slide. The hint is actually in the slide. Can anyone give it a try?
Ma'am, based on probability.
Yeah, based on probability, because like for Apple, there is no question. For data sets like Apple or oranges, there's no question. Of course, you have to do a hard clustering, and an orange cannot be an apple at any point of time, right? So, but there are some data which can go to more than one cluster. For instance, take a web page. Okay, so let's say my data point is not a fruit; it's a web page. It's not a fruit image; it's a web page. So the web page is on Sachin Tendulkar. Okay, so you all know, we all know that he is into sports and he is into many things. Like, don't you think a web page talking about him can be talking about both sports and ads, or his biography or whatever it is? Yes, right. So if we have clusters that are talking about topic clusters. So let's say this is a sport cluster, and this is say this is an ad cluster, ads. So who are this is talking about the models who are shooting in ads. Then don't you think that this web page can be a sport web page, can go to the sport cluster also, and it can also go to the ad cluster also? Makes sense, right? And as you said, someone said that it is based on the probability. Yes, the probability can be here in why? Because like this entire web page may be 80% cricket and 20% ad content will be there about him. So it is 80% sports cluster, 80% probability that it belongs to the sport cluster, and it shares 20% of it to the ad cluster. So that is what the difference between the hard clustering and soft clustering. So I'll just repeat it once again. Remember, hard clustering is the wherein like you can only put the data point into one cluster. So because this it makes no sense, like as we have apple and orange images. So there could be some data points where you can put it into more than one cluster. So that is the web pages talking about Sachin Tendulkar. So multi-topical data points are there, like, so you can think of many scenarios. So this I thought of telling you. Yeah, so that was on one dimension. I'm sorry, this is centroid models. This is hidden. Okay, I'm sorry. So this is centroid based models. So this is connectivity, and this is distribution based. So this is another way of looking at the types of clustering. So one was like, how do we assign the data points? And this dimension is about like, how do we take the clustering process? So you are given some apples and oranges. When two persons or two babies are given these apple and oranges, you can do you can group these data points in any way you want it, right? So what way you want to group data points and data items. So the way you perform that clustering, so that's how these models are going to differ from each other. So one is connectivity model. So it's like a hierarchical base model. So we take one apple, and we take this is apple, and this is orange. So they don't go. So if there are many fruits given to me, let's say this is orange, this is apple, orange, apple, orange, then what do I do is that I take this, I don't club it with this, I don't club it with this, I club it with this, and then I can club this, and I can take this and club this. So I go it in a hierarchical way. So that is called that is connectivity models. So how do you build connections? So these each and everything is called as a dendrogram. So you don't need to confuse much about that. The one famous clustering is like hierarchical clustering, so which falls into this category of clustering models. And this is centroid. These result in this is what we're going to see today, actually. So centroid, can anyone tell me like what centroid clustering can do? Give a guess about it.
It measures the distance, the shortest distance.
Yes, perfect. Yeah, correct. So centroid is like you have a circle and the central point, right? So you can think of like all the data points which are closer to each other in this circle can fall into this cluster. So that's how, so as ma'am said, like the centroid measures the shortest distance between the central point of the cluster, and then pulls the data points that are closer to it. So when you look at this, like this this x, the x, the points that are marked as x are actually centroid. So these green circles are closer to this x. So this is not closer to this x. So it should be here. That's why it's staying here. Even when you talk of, when you look at this blue data point, it is closer to this than to this. So if you if you look at this is closer to this than to this. That's why it is staying here in this cluster. Otherwise, it would have moved here. So this is called a centroid-based model, and that is what we are going to see today. We are going to see about k-means clustering. So that's how we started the presentation, right? So that is centroid clustering, and this is distribution-based models. So we said soft clustering, right? So this is distribution. So probability distribution. I can be here in this cluster. I can be here. So there could be max teachers who know more than me about this, right? So what strikes you when you see this? There's a mean and there's a variance. What distribution is this?
Normal
Fine.
distribution.
Yeah, yes, ma'am, correct. So this is normal distribution. So each distribution you can think of a cluster. So if you look at this data point, this is a web page which is also into this distribution, and it's also into this distribution. Can you locate this? It is both in red and green. Okay. So here comes the soft clustering, and here comes the probability, and that says that like this is more of this cluster into this cluster than to this cluster. So that's where you talk of probability, and that's where you talk of soft clustering. So here Bayesian clustering, and so such clustering will Gaussian clustering so can come here. Gaussian mixture models come into this category. And density, so DB-scan algorithm is there. So here when you talk of this, like density models are like where you have dense data points, dense connectivity between the data points. So then you put them into one cluster, right? So these circles are the red circles are dense. They are having high connections between them. So so this gets into one cluster. So that's how density models work. So this is how they are types of the clustering models are categorized. So, but what is our target is to understand in depth about centroid. So far, is there any doubts? Can we move? Yeah, fine. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead. Yes, yes. Yeah, how do you build connections, and then how do you find the similar objects? So for instance, like you have Facebook, right? Yeah, so when you find so many people are connected to have similar connections, don't you feel there are friends together? So those are density. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Any other questions? I cannot see the chat box. Like if there's any question you can ask, or Subin, you can help me out.
No, ma'am, there are no questions there.
Okay.
Hello,
fine.
ma'am. Hello.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes.
Ma'am, can you give us a real-time example of centroid clustering, like how
Yeah.
you gave for connectivity models?
Central clustering we are going to see, sir. That's what we are going to see.
Okay. This is in context with
yeah, we are going to see. Yes, sir. Fine. Okay. Yeah. So as sir has asked, like so this is what k-means is a perfect example of centroid. So these clusters you can visualize them as a circle because centroid. So that's what we are going to see. We're going to see an example, but I just wanted to give a superficial steps what k-means would include. So what we have, we all know that we are given. So what is our input? Input is a set of data points, right? So you are given only a set of data points. Remember, they are unlabeled. So you do not know what are the classes beforehand. So you have to guess by looking at the data, initially you are guessing. So if you're given a set of apples, so there's apples and oranges mixed together. Yes. Okay. The number of groups they may that might be present in the data point is initially guessed actually. So there are metrics to do that, but what experts say is that like to have a good analysis of the data points, and then you can choose the guess the number of k, and then you can finally evaluate how good is your clusters, and then you can go back and change the cluster. So let's say your guess is 2, k is equal to 2. That's what we have guessed here. Okay, so you are given a set of data points, you really don't know like what is in there, but you just guessed by looking at the data point, because like data scientists, they know they've been working for quite a long time on the data, right? So they're looking at the data, they can have a good guess on how many groups that can eventually be formed out of that data points. So now, so here the initial guess is that there are k is equal to 2. That means you are going to end up with 2 clusters. That's what this k means. Okay, I'll tell you what this means. So this k means the number of cluster. The k indicates the number of cluster you are going to form. So because it's an unsupervised, right? So you don't know like what are the types of in classification and supervised classification, you are given the labels. So you know how many apples are there, how many classes are there, you know, right? But here you do not know anything, but you got to do something without knowing anything. So number of clusters, we are fixing it beforehand. So k is equal to 2 as per our. So let's imagine we are given these many data points. So how many data points are there? There are total 8 data points. So we guessed to be 2. And we also initially, this is also a guess, remember? So we're going to find a red cluster and a green cluster. So this is one cluster, but I really don't know like whether this data point is a red data point or this data point is a green data point. I really don't know, but I just guessed it. So I took that as a centroid. Initially, I took that as a centroid. So let's name this. Okay, so C1 and C2. Let me put it as A, B, C, and this is D, E, F. Okay. So now I initially pulled this, since they've already named it, I don't want to rename them. So C1 and C2 goes in here. I randomly took any data point. Given 8 data points to me, I closed my eyes and I took randomly some data point. So initially, whatever you took pulled into the cluster, so that is going to be the centroid. No other go for us. That is going to centroid. You can think of centroid to be the representative of the cluster. Right, so representative, so that means like this representative you can think of like sir asked, right, like what could be the real-time example. This you can think of that. So you have documents, you have indexes, right? So let's say this topic is sports. So all these documents that are related to sports are linked to this category, clustered to this category. So this is called, this you can think of this centroid clustering, a kind of. Convinced, sir? Topic based clustering. So clustering the web pages, that you can think of centroid clustering. Okay, yeah. So so initially these are going to be the representative of the clusters. So I initially pulled these data points into this cluster. Okay, so now what do I do is that yeah, the initial step is done. Now what do I do? I just yeah, I'll redraw it once again. So C1 was there and C2 was there.
Madam,
yeah, yeah.
ma'am, there is one question from the audience. Aparna,
Yes, ma'am.
can you explain what is data point?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I'm sorry, I should have said that. A data point is nothing but a data point can be an image. It can be a text document. Okay, yeah. A data point is, thank you for the question, ma'am. Otherwise, I would have missed that. A data point is nothing. A data point is a multidimensional vector. So that's how you should visualize that. For instance, let's talk about, I'm not an image person, I'm a text person. So I'll give an example of a text data point. Let's talk about a text document D1. Okay, this is my data point. Okay, so this is having some lines in it, some words in it. I am converting that to a data point. How do I convert it? I have to convert it into a data point. I can fix any dimension to it. So when you think of a document, so what are the dimensions you can pull out of a document? So can you describe a document depending upon the topic or the number of words present in it, right? Or the number of sports words present in it? You can pull out anything. So number of vowels present in it, or number of lines present in it. So these are nothing but the features or the dimensions. Okay, so that are describing this data point document, which is a document. So your data point is an n-dimensional vector. Okay, so it's an n-dimensional vector, and remember, machine learning can only tackle with numericals. Yes, was there a question? Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
No. I'm
I
coming.
just want to,
No, ma'am.
Shubhalalita, ma'am. I'll take
Yes,
1
ma'am.
minute, ma'am.
Okay.
You recall in the first day, I have discussed about the fish, right? Types of fish, in which we accepted the color, lightness, shape. Okay, those are feature. When all these feature, it will feature vector. These feature vector for an image I have described, ma'am is describing for the document. Sometimes we say that it is a feature vector, sometimes we call it as a data point. Data point is nothing but the multidimensional features put together, which is also called as feature vector, which we have seen in day 1. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Yeah. So I'm coming to this. So you can describe, as ma'am said, like ma'am is an image person. So she would have described about the images. So so here we are talking about the document in terms of, but remember, machine learning tackles only numericals. All these features are converted into numbers and they are given. Okay. So this dimension could be 2-dimension, number of words versus number of sport words, or number of vowels, or number of sentences, or it can be a 3-dimension, or it can be any dimension. Okay, so these data point, this document is converted into some xy coordinate. That, I mean, these are essentially your features. They are numericals. Okay, this can represent this. This can represent any of this. This can be any number of dimension, but simplicity, you can think that right now xy coordinates. Right? Now got an idea what is data point? Thank you so much, ma'am. So that is data point. So having said that, now what we have to do is that we have 2 clusters, right? So initially we pulled one data point into one cluster and the other data point to the other cluster. So that was an initial guess. We don't even know this C2 means to stay here or it should go here. We do not know that. So that will happen eventually. So now what we have to do is that, so let me label this, and let me label this as C2, C1 and C2, A, B, C, D, E, F. Okay, whatever it is. Now I will take one data point. I will calculate the distance. Someone said that, right? Like shortest distance. I will calculate the distance between A and C1, this data point. We have metrics for that. I will show that in the next slide. It has it. So Euclidean distance metric. So you would have known that, right? Like the data points, the distance between x1 comma y1 and x2 comma y2. What is the distance? The Euclidean distance says that the square root of x1 minus x2 the whole square plus y1 minus y2 the whole square. Yeah. So that distance is calculated between this A and C, and A and C1 and A and C2, whichever is closer to this, that will be pulled to that particular cluster. So this is the initial step. Clear? And then this data point is taken, C is taken, and then it is compared with the distance between C1 and this data point and C and C2, whoever is closer to it, and it will be pulled to that cluster. So similarly, all the data points are calculated, and so that's what it says. Recompute, and every time remember. So we are going to see a in-depth example. Don't worry. So this centroid is not going to be the static. Initially, we had only one data point, so we declared this to be the centroid. We all know what is a centroid, right? So a centroid is nothing but the mean of all the coordinates. So if I have x1 comma y1, let's say these all belong to one cluster, x2 comma y2, x3 comma y3. Then the centroid is going to be x1 plus x2 plus x3 divided by 3, y1 plus y2 plus y2 plus y3 divided by 3. So this is what it is going to represent. So that means each and every time you put some new data point to the cluster, the centroid is going to differ. It is going to change. That's what I mean. So you given all these 8 data points, you do this process and you pull them to the respective cluster. And the story does not end there. Why? Because initially what you did was you just only, we only guessed it. So our guess might not be right always. So remember, so this might be, so there, this might, the initial, the point that we assigned here might actually belong to this cluster. We do not know. So what we have to do is that we have to iterate this step 3 and 4. I think the step, yeah. So this 3 is actually nothing but the changing the centroid and calculating, I mean, reassigning the data points. I have an example. I'm sorry about this. Yeah. So we have to repeat again and again, and then the iteration stops and all the data points are pulled into their respective cluster. So you might feel so confused. Don't worry. So this slide I will explain after this example. Yeah. So we'll see this example. So these are the data points. So somebody asked me what is the data point, right? So this data point, can anyone tell me how many dimensions they have? Each
Two
one is a data
dimensions.
point. 2 dimension, yeah. A and B. So A and B is a 2 dimension. So this subject 1, this is how the data points are represented. 1 comma 0. So this is how it is represented. Okay. So now what we have to do is that we have to cluster them to into 2 clusters. So our guess is going to be k is equal to 2. Okay. So initially what they did was, I said, right, like initially you will guess. So they picked randomly this individual and this individual, and they formed the cluster. So that means the point 1 is in one cluster. That may the point data point 4 is in another cluster. So the centroid is going to be themselves. So this data point is having the coordinate 1 comma 1, and the 4 is having 5 comma 7. So the centroid is going to be, there's no need of calculating the average, right? There's only single data point. So the mean vector centroid is going to remain the same. So this is step 2. Okay, so step 1 we will be given the data, and the step 2 is this is actually step 1. I'm sorry. So step 1 we are pulling initially we are pulling one data point. This is a guess. Okay, so one data point randomly, and we chose them and pulled in pushed into 2 clusters. Now what we are doing is that, I said, right, like there are 7 data points totally. 2 went into 2 clusters. So obviously we have 5 data points. We are taking each and every data point. So we took 2 and we calculated who's closer. So one data point is here and 4th data point individual is here. We took 2. we calculate the distance between this and this. Whoever is closer to that, that was assigned to that particular cluster. So see, so 1 was there, okay, 4 was there initially, step 1. In step 2, 2 was taken. It was calculated, the distance between 1 and 2 was calculated. So you can see that, you can check this. Okay, so how the distance is calculated, do I need to do that? So 1 comma 1, 2.5 comma 2, right? So if you check, the centroid would have changed. The centroid is 1 plus 1.5 divided by 2, 1 plus 1.5 divided by 2, and 1 plus 2 divided by 2. That's what they have taken the centroid. They would have calculated the distance to be this minus this, the whole squared, plus 1 minus 2 the whole squared. So the same they would have done for 2 with 4. So this would have been shorter. That's why they assigned to this cluster, and they are recalculating the centroid. I said, right? So whenever you add a data point, you have to recalculate the centroid. The centroid was initially 1 and this guy came in. So the centroid is changing, right? And here it remains the same because the 4 is, this is cluster 1 and cluster 2, and the 4, only fourth data point is here. So no need to change the centroid. And then the third guy came in. So this guy is also closer to the cluster 1 than to the cluster 2. So they are recalculating the centroid. So again, they would have recalculated the centroid by taking the average of x and y coordinates. And here also, here the mean centered vector remains the same. So again, so here they have taken the fifth data point. The fifth guy is closer to this cluster than to this. So now it is changing. The fifth data point is assigned to this cluster. So it was 5, 7 previously. Now they take the average of x and y coordinates with the fifth data point. So the vector is changing. And then they took the sixth guy. The sixth guy is closer to this cluster now. And again, this you can see this is changing. So they have changed the centroid, and here it remains the same. And the seventh data point is also closer to this centroid than to this. Remember, every time the distance between the centroid and the new data point is calculated. Okay, that's why we are tracking the centroid. So the seventh guy is also pulled into the cluster 2. Okay, now eventually the story does not end here. So eventually, we have 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, now the cluster purity might have affected when you do this. So initially you pulled this guy to this, right? So that might not be the choice. So why the logic behind, the crux behind this is that when you add more and more data point, this guy who was initially pushed in might be an alien to this cluster. Okay, so this is centroid, right? So you add, so initially it was there, so centroid, so 5, 6, 7, when you add more persons, so it means that like the circle is getting larger and larger. So that might, there is a chance that they may be closer to this cluster than to this cluster. So that's why this step came. So repeat steps 3 and 4, right? So that's what we were talking about. So now what you do is that after finishing pushing all the data points to the cluster, you don't end there. What you do is that you check whether they actually belong there. Now what you do, you take each and every data point because this one was there, right? You just calculate the distance between the itself, the centroid of itself, and the other cluster. Sometimes there is a chance that this one may be closer to this than to this. At that point, this one will go here. So you know that, right? So when a data point is removed or added, you have to recalculate the centroid. The centroid has to change here, as well as because we have to average between the 2 and 3. And now some new guy comes in, again the centroid has to be recalculated. So now after this guy comes in, again we have to check the other guys, right? So some other guy might go here. So there might be shifting happening between 2 two clusters again and again, at some point of time, there is stability. There's no, that's what this point, now you can understand this. The centroids of the newly formed clusters do not change. So the centroids remains change. That means there is no shifting of data points from one cluster. The points remain in the same cluster. They don't change. They belong to the same cluster. There's purity. So that means like they have settled in the cluster they actually belong to. So maximum number of iterations. This is no way connected to this. That means like when you're doing building a code, what happens is that you would have actually set the number of iterations, like your RAM should also support that, right? So maximum number of iterations is reached means like whether you pushed all the guys in the right cluster or not, you have to stop. You don't confuse about this right now. So you just think of these 2 points. So at that point of time, you actually stop. So that's how k-means work. So now, yeah, this is about the equivalent distance, which was taught earlier. So we can now we cannot. So now you can see that this is after pulling everything to the cluster. Now you can see the third point, the distance. So they are calculating the distance of each individual to its own cluster. So the first individual was checked with its own cluster. The distance is 1.5. Whether the cluster 2 is high, so it's okay. So it is in the right cluster. Whereas when you think of the data point 2, it is 0.4, and this is 4 point. This high, so it is in the right cluster. But look at the third data point. It is the distance between its the cluster to which it belongs to is 2.1, and this is 1.8. That means this is in the wrong cluster. This has to go here. Okay, the rest of the data points are fine. So after you do this, again you have to repeat the entire thing, and at some point of time when you again recheck this, all the guys would have settled in the right cluster. So is it so confusing, or this is k-means clustering? Is it confusing or clear? Any doubts you can ask.
Ma'am, the value of k also we have assumed in the beginning, k equal to 2.
Yeah, I'm coming
that
to
can
that,
also be changed. Okay.
Yes, yeah, I'm coming to that. I'm coming to that. Like in the steps, you have any doubts, you can ask. Fine. Fine. Okay. Evaluation. Yeah, as ma'am said, like you asked the right question. Was your guess right? Might not be right always, right? So we have methods to set the guesses right. Umarani ma'am, do we have a break, or I can continue? I can continue, right, ma'am? Fine. So there are methods to check our guesses: elbow method and silhouette coefficient. Yeah. So what elbow method says is that, like for each k, so we have the data point centroid, right? So this is a C1 and this is C2. So now we have. Yes, ma'am.
We have
Yes, ma'am.
break at 11:30, and there is one question.
Okay,
Ma'am, can you shall I read? How is the
Yes, ma'am.
centroid calculated? With whom it is calculated? You can look into a chat box and then answer.
Okay.
We have break at 11:30, ma'am. 30 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Okay.
What about, there is another question. What about fourth one in the example, ma'am? Can you have a look? Yeah, thank you.
What about the fourth one? Okay. Okay. Yeah, we'll look at that. Yeah, the fourth data point was actually in the second cluster, right? Obviously, the distance between itself and the other cluster should be high. It was there in the second cluster. So it is in the right cluster. You get it? I think this is confusing. This step is confusing, right? This step I will maybe explain again. That's what the question is about, right? So this step is actually done after all the data points. So initially, what did we do? After this step says that 1, 2, 3 belongs to one cluster, and 4, 5, 6, 7 belongs to the other cluster. Okay, so that's what this and this ended up in. But now I said, right, now we have to check each and every data point, the distance between that data point to this cluster and to this cluster. That's what we have to look at it. So now in that case, what we are taking is that this data point is taken, this data point is taken, and it is checked. This will have a centroid, right? And the distance between this data point and the centroid of this cluster, let's say this is centroid 1 and this is centroid 2. The distance between this 1 and this is centroid 1 is calculated. Distance between 1 and this centroid 2 is calculated. That is given here. So that distance is 1.5. The distance between this data point and to this cluster is 1.5, and to this cluster is 5.4. That means this data point is closer to this cluster than to this cluster. That means it is in the correct place. Okay, I'll explain all the cases, then it will make clear. Then we are taking the second data point and we are calculating the distance between the centroid 1 and the distance between the data point 2 and the centroid 2. So that distance is 0.4. The distance between the centroid of this cluster and data point 2 is 0.4, whereas this is high. So that means this is farther from this centroid and closer to this centroid. That means it is in the correct place. So this can stay here, this can stay here. And we are taking the third data point and we are calculating the distance between the third data point and the centroid 1. So that comes to be 2.1, and the distance between the third data point and the other centroid 2 that comes to 1.8. That means this is higher. That means this is farther from the centroid in which it belongs to, and it has become closer to this centroid. So it is in the wrong place. It has to be moved. Okay. Now it has to be moved. So what it will be done? What we will do is that we will take this guy and put it here. Okay. When we take this guy and put it here, now you have to recalculate the centroid. And here also the centroid will change. Okay. So now we are taking the fourth data point and we are calculating the distance between itself and to this centroid. This seems to be higher. That means this is farther from this centroid. So it is in the correct place. And we are taking the fifth data point and we are calculating the distance between the centroid 1 and centroid 2. So this seems to be higher and this seems to be closer. So it is in the correct. So sixth data point also is in the correct because the cluster to distance is smaller. So this is in the correct position. Seventh data point, these are all happening after moving this guy to this cluster. So 2.8, so that is seventh data point is taken and that also is closer to the cluster 2. That means it is in the right distance. What you can again do is that you can now check whether this guy, you can now what you can do is that because the centroid has changed here, right? We did the correction here, but we can also check it once again whether these two guys are actually belong here. So they will actually belong there. So there'll not be any movement between the data points need not move between the clusters because they are in the right clusters because we have verified the distance between them and their respective centroids. So when the movement stops, when there is no movement, at that point of time, we can stop the clustering and we can make sure that we have formed we have pushed all the data points in the cluster. So the correct cluster is that this is the final cluster. Now got it, ma'am? Did I answer your question, by the way?
Ma'am, can you read the question? which is in the chat.
Okay.
Ma'am, can you explain the shifting of centroid or say change of centroid position, how it happens? I think you have given explanation on that.
The question came before the explanation or after the explanation, ma'am?
11.3, I think before. You can ask ma'am, Gargi.
You can.
Yeah, you can.
Okay, ma'am.
Is that
Can
fine?
you show the previous slide?
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Previous slide question.
This one, ma'am.
Okay.
The doubt is cleared, or you want to ask the doubt?
Clear. Just want to see the question. Okay, clear.
Okay, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes. This is actually k-means. Like, this is how the clustering happens. Is there any questions further? You can unmute and ask.
One more question on the chat.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, understood.
Understood. Okay.
It's like random digit statement. Can you have a look once in chat?
1 second, ma'am. Can you quickly recap the steps? Yes, sure. Okay.
In another chat window,
Okay.
that was the question. Go.
Okay. It's like random digits taken means I did not understand. So what is the random digit is about?
Yeah.
Miss Kokila, can you make the question clear? Random digits in the sense you're talking about the data point?
Yes, ma'am, I'm talking about the data point. Actually,
Okay.
the number is coming between 1 and 2 or 1 and 3. So it will be taken as a random number like 2.3, 2.8 or a
No, there's
specific
no
number.
randomness. There's no randomness here.
Okay.
We are taking the actual values. There's no random. The only randomness was guessing the number of clusters and pushing one data point into, initially we pushed the data points into the cluster. That is only random. The rest of the steps are done on the actual values of the data points. There's no randomness. Did I answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, so somebody asked me to summarize. I'll do that. Okay. Yeah. So initially, I'll explain the example. I think that will make sense. Yeah. So initially, we will be given with data points. Sorry. Yeah. Initially, we will be given with data points. The data points will not be given with any class labels. Nobody told us what these data points is about. This can describe any data point. This can be a document. This can be an image, or it can be anything. We do not know. We are given their coordinates. Remember, this is the features describing this data point. This 1, 1 is the dimension. Each dimension is describing the characteristic, and it is called as the features in machine learning jargon. So these are given to us. Now, we do not know anything about this. We are going to group them into 2 clusters. That's what we are going to do. What we are going to do is that since we don't know anything, so we just took the guess. That is, we just guessed that at the, you can ask me like, how did you guess it? We just guess it by just looking at the data sets. So you will have the practice as in when you work on many data sets, like you will have the guess. So you can make the guess. and we also have metrics about which we will look at it after the summarization. And then we can change this guess. Come again, like if your clusters are looking very impure, the iteration is going bad. So we were iterating here, right? The iteration is not ending, and there's some problem. It's not, they're not settling down. That means there's some problem with your K, which you initially guessed. So that we can always change. But as of now, to summarize, I'll just say that we are guessing some value of K. That K is nothing but the number of clusters we are going to see. And yeah, this K is the number of cluster. Now we can understand what does this means actually mean. This means actually mean is the centroid. Every time we are checking with the centroid, right? So hence the name K means. Okay, so we guess the value of K, and the next step, the step number one, what we will do is that we will just randomly pick one data point, two data points, and push them. Since we decided the cluster number of clusters to be 2, we took 2 data points randomly, and then we pushed into each of the cluster. So here we have taken 1 and 4. The centroid is the data points themselves, because there's only one data point. There's no point in taking the average. Okay. Now what we are going to do is that we are taking each and every, the rest of the data points we have pushed. We are given with 7 data points. We have pushed 2 data points into the number of clusters we initially guessed. And we have the 5 data points yet, and they have to be pushed into the clusters. We cannot do that randomly. So what we are going to do is that anyway we have the mark, the centroid. So we are going to see who is closer to the data point. This 2 is taken. 2 is taken. The 2 we have the coordinate. So this is the coordinates, x and y coordinates of 2. We are going to calculate the distance between the centroid of this centroid and this centroid. So I said that we can use Euclidean distance, x1 minus x to the whole squared plus y1 minus y to the whole squared. So we are taking the distance. So it looks like this is closer to the cluster 1 and the cluster 2. Remember, the distance is not listed here in this example. Don't get confused. This is only mean centroid. This 1.2 came by adding 1 plus 1.5 by 2, x1. So the centroid is calculated by x1 plus x2 divided by 2, y1 plus y2 divided by 2. That's how this came. So whenever you add, remember, whenever you add a data point to a cluster or you delete move a data point from the cluster, you have to recalculate the centroid. So that should be kept in mind. So we added this guy, so we recalculated the centroid. Here we did not do anything, so the centroid remains the same. We are taking the third, and then we are this seems to be closer to this than to this, so we are changing the centroid. Again, the fifth data point is taken. So this seems to be closer to this centroid. So the cluster centroid changes. And the sixth data point is taken. And that seems to be closer to this than to this. And so it is pushed here. The seventh is taken. And that is also closer to this. The centroid is formed. Okay. So now we have assigned all the data points to the clusters, and we have formed the clusters using the 7 data points given to us. So it does not end here. Why? Because initially there were 2 guesses, and the data points were initially guessed and pushed into. So what happens is that, like, eventually the data points which were in one cluster may be actually farther from itself compared to the other cluster. Why? Because, like, when we are dealing with only 7 data points, so you can think of like large scenarios. So when we are dealing with millions of images or any text documents or data points, something like that. So this may not be the case. So when you add more and more data point, the cluster can get impure. So at that point of time, this data point which you initially added may belong somewhere to some other cluster than to itself. So that's why we are again in this step, we are checking whether each data point belongs to itself even after the clustering process. So we're taking the first data point and we are calculating comparing the distance between the centroid. So this is the final centroid we got. So to this centroid, we are calculating the distance between 1 and this centroid, 2 and this centroid, 3 and this centroid. Also, we are calculating the distance between 1 and this centroid, 2 and this centroid, 3 and this centroid. We're doing the same for these guys also. So that's what we are doing. So while doing so, 1 seems to be closer to the cluster 1. So that means it is in the, so this was the case, right? 4, 5, 6, 7. So that means they are in the, it is in the right place. Even 2 was closer to the centroid 1 than to centroid 2. That means it is in the right place. Whereas when we look at 3, it is closer to the cluster 2, which it, but it is in the cluster 1. So that is a wrong, it's in the wrong place. Now this guy has to be moved in here. That's why we moved. So remember, when we move some data point from the other cluster, but this centroid will also change and this centroid will also change. So initially we were comparing with this centroid. Now we will have a new centroid and we will compare with that distance. So when we do that, the fourth data point will be compared to the new centroid, and then this will also have a new centroid now, and this will also have a new centroid now. Okay, so when it was compared, so 5, this is closer to the cluster 2, and data point 5 was closer to the cluster 2, and 6 is also in the right place, 7 is also in the right place, despite the fact that the new centroid is calculated. So that means, and again, so there's no movement. So everybody are perfect and they settle in the right cluster. So the clustering stops. So that's the summary. Okay. So this is about, like, did we guess it right? Okay. So how did we guess it right? So that's the point. Elbow method. Okay. So the elbow method says that what we do is that we have done everything. Okay. I said, right, we fixed some maximum number of iteration. Despite checking this, so sometimes the maximum before when the maximum number of iterations reach, you will understand when you do the code. So let's say, like, you fix some 100 iteration. So within this 100 iteration, this criteria would not have actually met. So before that, you would have stopped, terminated the clustering. So at that point of time, the K you fixed might be wrong. So at that point of time, so we have to check whether we have actually got the right K. Okay. Uma ma'am, I will do this elbow method and then we will go for a break. Ma'am, silhouette coefficient, I will continue with.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
11:30. 15 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. So now, so this elbow method, what we do is that we take all the, so this elbow, I'll talk about this, like why the name came. So we have the data points in all the cluster, in the cluster. We take the data points and we take the sum of the distance between the all the data points to its cluster centroid, and we take to this we do the same for this cluster data points also. We don't do cross cluster distance. We only check the distance between the data points of that particular cluster to that centroid. So we take that. What happens is that when you do that, this is the distance I was talking about. This distance is nothing but within cluster square distance. So each of the data points is taken, and when you do that, your guess was K, right? K, this says that the number of cluster is 1, number of cluster is 2, number of cluster is 3, and number of cluster is 4. So when you plot the graph between that distance you calculated with the initial guess you actually worked on and the number of clusters, so you can vary the number of clusters, and the point at which this looks like an knee elbow, right, our hand. So the bend, where the bend happens, so that actually gives the, I mean, where it becomes stagnant, it does not the distance does not change anymore. Okay, so the distance should be closer, right? The logic behind this is that the data points present in the centroid, it should be closer to that. So there's no point if you're, so if you had, this means that if you had fixed the value of K to be 1 or K to be 2, then the distance will be so high. That's what it says. When you plot the graph between the number of clusters and the distance should not be very high. The distance should drop. Okay, so when the distance will drop, that means you have fixed the right number of clusters. That point of time, you have fixed the right number of clusters. So think of this real-time example. You have apples you have oranges and you have a grape. Okay. What if you had only 2 cluster? That's bad, right? So that means you have wrongly pulled some grapes also into the apple and to the orange clusters. Then that is bad. So this grapes will have when the cluster number of clusters is actually 3, and but you guessed to be 2, then it's bad. Then this distance is going to be very high. That's what this actually means. Okay. So then this will be high, but when you guessed it to be 3, then that should be okay. So that means the grapes are in the grapes cluster, and you have a third cluster which is for grapes. So grapes are fine here, and oranges are fine here, and apples are fine here. They are all fine with their own clusters. And at that point of time, each data point will be having good distance between the centroid and the them, I mean, among them. So that distance will be very low. So that's what this indicates. So then this is a good indicator. So then you can check that, like if you have not guessed this cluster, then you can go back and rework on this. You can change this cluster. So your guess was 2, right? So then you have to make it as 3, and you can repeat the entire process. So that is about elbow method. Clear?
So you've given the example apple, orange, and then grapes, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Suppose if you go after 3, if you want to have a k equal to 4,
Mm.
what happens? That part we have to take k equal to 4,
Mm.
then that becomes stable.
Yeah, the distance becomes label. Yeah. So there's no point. I mean, you can have a number of clusters, but there is not that is not required. That cluster will almost be empty, right? So there is no point in having one more cluster. I'm right? Is that right, ma'am? Yes. There's no point in having.
After 3, if you have one more cluster, that is
There's no point. Yeah.
too much.
Yes. Yeah. That won't update too much. That means like this is the correct number of clusters to stop there. If you add some more clusters, that's waste of time, right? So you're increasing the number of clusters where no data points can go. So that's no point in that. So you can just check, I mean, stop at this point, and you can fix the number of k to be there, because this tells that, because the distance is nothing but the average distance you get between the distances between the data points of each and every cluster, and you take the average. That's what this distance is saying. Okay. So WSS, the within cluster distance square. Yes, ma'am. Convinced, ma'am? Yes, ma'am.
Yes. There's one more question from Aparna.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. So this was asked before this explanation or after this explanation?
Right now.
Ma'am, can you ask your question? Put your question. I did not understand. Aparna, ma'am.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
If clusters we have guessed 3.
Okay.
Of that, before guessing 3, we have guessed 5.
Hmm.
Then what would happen?
Yeah, that's what ma'am also said. Instead of having, instead of having 3 is compact, right? So this distance is nothing but the average of each and every, so you have C1, C2, and C3, right? So, this gives some distance, and this gives some distance between the centroid, the square of the distance, the difference between the, x1, x2, x3, and many data points is there, means this gives one distance. That is nothing but the square of the distance between the uh, centroid and these data points. That's what this distance, and this also gives some distance. You take the average. Okay. So that is what we are plotting against the number of clusters. So in case if you had got 5, that means you had taken more number of clusters than you actually require. Okay, then there is no point. So the average, I mean, the distance is going to be stable, right? The fourth and the fifth cluster will almost be empty. Okay, so when you take the average, I mean, it's going to be empty. There is no point in having the number of clusters high when you don't need it, right? Okay. Yeah.
So so the point is that when you have more than the required number of clusters, you can see that the distance has become almost stable.
Stable. Yes,
After
ma'am.
4, 5, so you can have a look 4, 5, 6, and so on. So since the distance is not changed too much, then you can stop at the required cluster is 3. So if you even after if you have keeping more cluster 4, 5, and 6, it's just will not useful for you. So you can stop at 3.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Is any other doubts?
Any other doubt? We can. Floor is open for doubt session. Yes, I will share all the PPT. No issues. I will share at the end. Sir will give today. Any other question from participants? So I think if there is no doubt or no more questions, we can go for a break. In your feedback, yesterday I have read 1 or 2 feedback. So some were saying that after taking the theory session, if you can handle the practice session, it will be more beneficial for them. So ma'am is also planning the same. So the next session would be the practice session based on the K-means cluster. I think this will help you. And in the afternoon session, ma'am will teach you what is that natural language processing, and its practice session. This is about one of the feedback I received. And second feedback, some of the participants said that the flow of the content is fast. So if you feel whenever ma'am is going very fast, you can just type it in the chat so that we can reduce the flow, ma'am. That we can.
Yeah. They can. I mean, instead of even posting it in the chat box, if they unmute and interrupt me, I'm fine with that.
That ma'am is faster, or if something is somewhere something is confusing, then you can post in the chat. Then we will help you to address that problem. And one more doubt was confusion matrix was not clear. One of the feedback I read that confusion matrix is clear. So I will ask my one of the scholar Subin Sahayam. Subin. So he will explain
Yes, ma'am.
confusion matrix once again in the afternoon session after completing all the session. I received more suggestions than yesterday, so it actually encourages us to keep improving the workshop. Okay, so even though I could read every feedback very keenly, these are the overall feedback that I have received. However, I could also try to address the other feedback. So I keep reading all your feedbacks one by one. So keep supporting us, and we will try to resolve all. Thank you. We will meet at 11:45.
Okay, ma'am.
Can we something, ma'am? One more question.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you unmute and say the chat box?
Yes, ma'am. Can we, how to put this up in layman's language? How to put this up to in layman's language? You want to teach class 9 and class 10 students, sir?
Yes, ma'am. So can we give some simple examples, ma'am, like you gave about apples and oranges? Because we have already started AI from class 8 this year. So we'll be going towards AI in class 9 and class 10, consequently. And we have already, our school already has got Python from class 6. And as per CBSE, class 9 will be starting off with the basics of Python.
Okay.
So accordingly, not many students are takers of coding, So, in order to generate interest, we have to come down to their level.
Yes.
So that is why the lecture is very interesting, ma'am. But how to put it up in front of these students, ma'am? That's what my basic question is.
Yeah, it's actually a pragmatic question, right? Yeah. We have to look at the case studies, like give me some time. I will
Okay.
definitely, I will maybe in the lunch break, I will think about it, like how to, I should have actually thought about it. I'm really sorry about this. How to put it to school students. We have to look at, in the next session, we are going to see about like customers, to group customers about. So similar to that, like we can even bring that to even a lower level, how to implement this. You want from the implementation perspective, or even from the concept perspective, you're asking?
So, ma'am, just basic example. We don't want to teach them all this stuff right now, but just to get a general idea, just by giving simple day-to-day examples,
Yeah,
about
simple.
clustering, like
Simple
you
day-to-day examples, like you in your class, like we will grade students. It's not a good idea, but how do you actually, maybe in terms of height, you can cluster groups, right? We form groups, right?
Yeah, madam. Just those simple examples, in case, after we want to, apart, if we want to teach beyond the textbook, you see, because the textbook will always have the basics only. So if you want to go beyond the textbooks, and, there are certain smart students who want to know more about, all these things about clustering, about centroid clustering. So, if I want to give some real simple, examples,
Real
so
example in
they
the
would
sense,
also,
real-time computer science
yeah.
related examples.
Yeah.
Computer science.
Ma'am, you gave examples of apples and oranges. Now that was really very good, ma'am. That was
Yes, thank you.
literally also I as a layman was able to understand.
Thank you so much.
So yeah, so madam, all this type of clustering, if we can just get some good examples, so that I would be able to deliver in front of my students.
Maybe like we should think from their perspective, sir, like
Yeah.
what they actually use in their real time. So my kid is in 4th grade, so they use games, right? They play games.
Yeah.
So maybe can we cluster the games they play?
Yes, that is a good example, ma'am.
Yeah. So we can cluster the games, the type of games they play. I do not know much about what she plays, but she plays some games. So online, I mean, in phone, like can we cluster those games? So they all belong to some kind of. So some games are like, I mean, attacking, or some games are some other types, right? So they are, I mean, filling some baskets or something like that. Each games are of some category. So these games can be clustered. So if you are able to cluster these type of games, then you can actually generalize it. The idea is to generalize it. All these games come to this category, and now you can generalize that. So that means if you want to build some app kind of for that particular game, so if you are having a general concept to build app for that particular game, so you can also enhance that for all the games that fall into that cluster. Make sense, sir? I just guess.
Yeah, something like that, ma'am. That's somehow convincing.
Yeah, so we should think from their perspective, sir. That's the only